So the first thing that I always think about when I'm designing any kind of experience, whether it's a book club or a course or something else, is just where are my users at? I'm trying to understand like the psychology of my users and what their needs are and where they're coming from.
Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. My name is Monica Burns, and I am so glad that you're here to join me today. If you want to make the most of education technology, aka EdTech, well, you are in the right place. My goal has always been to help make EdTech easier and give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Every Tuesday here on the Easy EdTech Podcast, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. Get ready for solo episodes where I share some quick tips and stories, and interviews full of practical ideas and stories from new guests each month. If we mention something you'd like to check out, make sure to click the link. You'll find it in the episode description or the summary area where you're listening to this podcast, or you can find every episode and all of the resources we mention by going to classtechtips.com/podcast or by going to classtechtips.com and just clicking on the Easy EdTech Podcast button at the top of the page. This episode is sponsored by my Amazon storefront. I've pulled together more than a dozen lists of my favorite gifts, books, and spring cleaning items for educators. My collections on Amazon make it easy to find all of my books written by Easy EdTech Podcast guests, and so much more. Use the link classtechtips.com/Amazon to go straight to my Amazon storefront. That's classtechtips.com/Amazon. On today's episode, I chat with Linda DeYounge all about the magic of virtual book clubs. I recently had the chance to join a session she facilitated for my book, EdTech Essentials, and after experiencing the process firsthand, I knew I had to get a behind-the-scenes look. Linda joins today. She shares her entire strategy from the tools she used to her best advice for fellow educators. Whether you're hosting a live virtual book club or designing an asynchronous experience, you'll definitely appreciate Linda's practical tips and strategies in this episode. Let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast, Linda. I am so excited to chat with you today about how to host a successful virtual book club. And we've talked about this topic in the past, so I'm really pumped for listeners to get your ideas, your tips, your perspectives. But before we get into all of that, can you share with everyone, what is your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, Monica, I'm super excited to be here and thanks for having me join. So I work as the online learning program manager for the Learning Technology Center. And basically my day-to-day is that I do all of our online operations here at the LTC. So that means that I develop online courses. I work with other content creators to develop those as well. I do webinars, workshops. I co-host our podcast. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just wonderful to be able to support educators with online virtual options because that's becoming more and more needed and popular as we move into a fully digital age.
Yeah. And it's been interesting. I was chatting with someone this week about webinars and, hybrid experiences where, after, the kind of fully virtual aspects of distance learning during COVID, I think there was some pushback of everything's got to be in person again. But there's so many things that are valuable about hybrid, self-paced, virtual experiences. And today we're talking about virtual book clubs for professional learning. So what inspired you to start a virtual book club for educators?
So I'm a huge avid book reader. I was an English teacher for 7 years. And when I was thinking about the book club experience. I was a part of so many book clubs when I was in the classroom. And even today, like I'm a part of other book clubs that are not education focused. And I thought, wouldn't it be a wonderful opportunity to bring that into a virtual format so that it was a little more flexible, whether it's hybrid or self paced, to really meet people where they're at? Because so many people are reading professional books
Mhm.
and using those to inform their decisions in the classroom and their pedagogical decisions. Because there are so many great books out there that really do help educators to, level up their teaching practices and get insights and tips and tricks for things that they might not have thought of on their own. So that's kind of where it all stems from, is this want and need for educators to be able to be met where they're at. I know that they're reading, so let's get them a book study format that works for them.
Yeah. And just that idea of honoring a practice that you know is taking place and forming something that people can participate in a way that makes sense for them, I think is so huge. So, like you mentioned, you and many listeners, right, may be part of book clubs, right, on a personal side with groups of friends or in other genres, right, outside of professional learning. So for as much as someone might be familiar with the concept, right, of a book club, particularly, participating in a book club where everyone gets together or jumps on Zoom or whatever that might look like, for someone who's hosting a book club like this, for professional learning, for a group of educators for the very first time, what are the most important or the key steps to get started?
That's a great question. So, the first thing that I always think about when I'm designing any kind of experience, whether it's a book club or a course or something else, is just, where are my users at? I'm trying to
Mhm.
understand like the psychology of my users and what their needs are and where they're coming from. And so, that could lead to something like, I know that my users value self paced types of learning. And so, if I know that that's the case, I'm going to start designing something that is on their own pace. There's not going to be a lot of those like check ins and
Mhm.
you have to be here at this time on Zoom at this time. Otherwise, you're just not participating, because that can create a barrier for my people. Now, on the opposite side, there are many people who want a more involved type of book
Mhm.
study. They want to meet up, they want to, chat with the other people. And if that's the case, then I'm thinking about that. So that's the first step, is just, what are my users doing? And then from there, I think about, how can I structure this that's going to be impactful? So it's not just going to be, we all meet and it's like, well, what did you think of the
Right.
chapters? But rather has some structure that either we're making something, we're doing something, we have some guiding kind of format that we're using. And in my case, I also really like to gamify things. So I
Mhm.
like to provide some sort of like gaming element where it's like you're collecting things as you complete things, or you're, building like a board with your fellow book study people so that you have like a common resource catch all where you're kind of co creating it together. And so those are all things that I start to take into account as I'm building, because, it can be so easy just to say, here's the book. We're
Yeah.
going to meet at these dates and we're
Mhm.
just going to say, how did it go?
And just that level of intention, right? Like it can feel, I'm sure, with everyone's busy schedule, hard enough to find a date to meet for that first session, right? So like I understand about some of the logistical pieces, right? But that intention that you just shared, right? All the things that need to be really thought out. And I don't want that to feel like a reason for someone not to jump in, right? But it just take a moment to step back, right? Take a deep breath. What is it that you really want to accomplish with the group? How can you make it engaging, productive? I love what you said about the co-creation, right, of a resource, because that might be, the artifact or the takeaway that really helps the book club not just be, right, a one-time thing, but that happens as people are reading, multiple check-ins over a course of time, and gets them to remember what they talked about a year later, right? Or 2 school years from now. So I imagine, right, setting that intention And the logistical pieces are just part of the first steps. One other big thing, right, is the book choice. So, what makes a book a strong choice for professional learning in a virtual book club format?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that when you're thinking about a book that you want to use with people, it has to be broadly applicable to
Mhm.
multiple types of educators and roles and subjects. If you're in a group of high school teachers, for example, you might get high school teachers from all subject matters
Yeah.
in this book study. Or maybe it is just with your English teacher cohort and then you can be a little bit more specific. But if you really have that broad audience, like I had with our recent book study we did, you have to think about what is something that's going to be applicable to lots of people. And then I, I hate to say it, but picking a book that's like a shorter length rather
Yeah.
than like a 300, 400
Mhm.
page book, people just don't have the bandwidth necessarily to do that type of reading in a shorter format. And also just think about what's a book that we can, spend enough time in that, it doesn't drag on for months and months and months, but
Mhm.
it's still enough content where we can like dig into some really interesting pedagogical practices. And then I always look for books too that have some sort of like tips, tricks, resources, even books that have like worksheets and little guides
Mhm.
that teachers can fill out as they go because I think that can be more impactful sometimes than big picture. Even though big picture is really important,
Yeah.
it can lead to questions like, well, how do I use this? And then if that
Mhm.
resource isn't immediately available, it can be frustrating.
Yeah. And just, it's interesting as you were saying that because it's been a while since I've gotten a book that's been assigned to me where I went to the back page to see how many what the number was, right? I'm probably thinking back to a high school English class or something where I'm like, gosh, how long is it going to take me to read East of Eden, right? Or something, right?
Yep.
That's a big run. But, that idea of getting something that feels doable, that has action items, that has supplemental resources that go along with it. And I like what you mentioned, really knowing your group, right? So maybe it could be very specific, right? If you have a dozen folks who are really honed in to one particular subject area or grade level or mission. But if you're casting a wider net, right, you want to make sure everyone feels like that book is for them. And I would imagine, that becomes a big part of the process. So, that level of intention, right, starting there with both the structure, choosing a book, thinking about, those important steps for getting started. When it comes to the logistical pieces, how do you structure meetings? Do you recommend a really specific cadence like weekly check ins or monthly sessions or something more flexible like an asynchronous piece? Or maybe there's not just one answer to that?
Yeah, I think that if you, again, like there's lots of ways to structure book studies. So I would encourage people who are looking to do so to really broaden your horizons of what you think of a book study because it can be so easy to think about a book study as just we've all read chapters 1 through X.
Mhm.
We're all showing up in a physical circle where we have chairs in a circle and we're all talking about it in person. But if you really break open the idea of what a book study can be, you run into all kinds of possibilities. So, a few ways that I've done this is, we have, for example, at the LTC, we have a self paced book study called Book Quest. It's really fun. It's like a gamified book study where you have a little digital hero that you get gear for as you like submit artifacts. It's fun, but it's all self paced. And so when you're going in, you submit a book for approval. And then from there, it's kind of like you have the whole year to accomplish this book. You
Mhm.
can decide when am I reading it? When am I submitting things? Maybe 1 month you're super busy and you don't get around to it. That's totally fine. You can always come back the next month when you have a little more time or over the holidays if you want to be, reading over Christmas break. So that's one way to structure where it's just fully free and open, and you're really giving that choice and voice back to the participants and saying, you know your schedule, you know yourself best. You figure out, when this is going to work for you and how you want to structure it. You can also go a little bit more rigid and do sort of like a hybrid model for virtual where you're having people read on their own. And then there are meetup dates you have decided beforehand. Okay, we're going to meet on this date. We're going to meet on this date. We're going to meet on this date. However, I would encourage, as you're designing something that is virtual or hybrid, to think about what are going to be the choke points for
Mhm.
people. And some of those choke points are going to be I can't make the meeting because my son has a doctor's appointment. I can't make the meeting because I have other obligations, or I get sick and I was planning on being there, but now I can't be. Some of those other chokeholds might be I can only read part of the book. I only got around to part of it, but I still learned something. So do I not get credit for what I've read? So if we think about all those choke points, you can start thinking about, can the meetings be optional? Are there ways to still include people in those meetings by sending out like a recap or having an online discussion board? Can people just get credit for the parts that they read? So if I only read chapters 1 through 4, I submit artifacts for that. I'm still going to get some sort of benefit from that, whether it's professional
Yeah.
development hours or it's I still get to be on the choice board that we're all co creating together. But thinking about, as people, just meeting people where they're at, deciding how do I eliminate those choke points to make it as accessible, flexible, and beneficial for everybody, even if they can come along with us only part of the way.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good reminder for someone who is anticipating, right, from the beginning that there is going to be, those moments, right? I sometimes use the word like friction, right? Like, what are those friction points that I can eliminate for someone to make this smoother or easier or even just feel better, right? Like for someone
Yeah.
who's already like at capacity, wants to do this, right, is motivated to do this. Yeah. Like, I don't want them to feel disappointed or like bad about themselves, or anything like that when like things just happen. So I love that idea of removing those, choke points, right? Those friction pieces that might get in the way for someone feeling successful when just, being part of it is such a, taking on that, right, piece is such a thing to be celebrated. So, you mentioned a few different structures and you acknowledge that people are busy, right, over the course of the year. So what can help maintain momentum throughout, a book club? Is it part of the gamification, like you mentioned earlier, right? Is there something you would recommend to someone to help really keep that momentum going?
Yeah. So I think one of the key points of momentum is just to try to make your book study format as paced and clipped along as possible. I see book studies online specifically tend to lose momentum if it's like, hey, we're going to be meeting only once a month, or we're going to be meeting every couple months, and it's going to be a year-long book study.
Yeah.
You're really going to lose momentum because people are not going to be in it. They're gonna forget that it's
Yeah.
happening. They're not gonna feel, I hate to say like a sense of urgency because I never want people to feel anxious or urgent, like, I have to do this, but they're gonna lose that sense of urgency of like,
Totally.
this is
Mhm.
happening over only a couple months. And so if I'm not, participating and coming to the stuff, it's gonna kind of leave me by. So think about how you want to pace it. And then also just for virtual book studies, be a really good communicator about, when the meetups are happening. One way that I've structured even a hybrid setup is to build a sort of like online course or Google site or something like that
Nice.
that becomes
Mhm.
a catch-all for, here's all the links for the online meetups, here's all the links to resources, here's the schedule, here's the calendar. So it's all in one place, and that kind of is a place where people can land and go, okay, I know what's going on. I'm not lost. I'm not confused. But then also, you as the facilitator, just having that open communication, drop into people's emails like a week before the next meetup. Hey, this is what we did at our last
Yeah.
meetup. It was
Mhm.
super fun. This is stuff that we talked about. This is stuff we accomplished. Look at this cool thing we made together. You should come to the next one. It's happening in a week. Sign up. And if you can't, that's totally fine. Here's when the next one is after this one that's
Mhm.
coming up, So just like trying, kind of being your own cheerleader and hype person of like, hey, don't forget, we do cool things in this book study, and
Right.
trying to get people to come along with you.
And that's wonderful too, because you're really leaning into some of the communication strategies, the tools, the things that might already be part of your organization, right? Like we're sticking to emails, right? We got a thread, you can find everything. I made a Google site for you. It's one link and it has everything on there. We're using Zoom or Meet or Teams or whatever it is that we already use, right? So, there's not something else for someone to like remember where to go or what to log into. So I love that leaning into some of those same things. So if someone's listening today and, they're wanting to go forward with this, they're excited, they even have a book in mind, right, that they've been had on their desk for, a couple of months and they've wanted to do this and now they're feeling like a little more ready. What advice would you give to someone who's hoping to start a virtual book club with their colleagues or peers, this school year?
I think my major piece of advice for anyone looking to start something virtual is one, just to really start thinking outside the box. That's the main thing. When you're designing virtual things, it is it is very different from in-person things. As someone whose entire, life lives online now because that's
Yeah.
my position, is I do everything online related. It is extremely different from in-person events and, types of activities. So just think about how can I be totally, innovative, new, creative with this idea? Is there some kind of, cool incentive I can give people for participating? Is there some kind of fun theme or structure I can give to this? Is there some sort of activity that we can do together that's going to be really impactful? And that's going to be the driving force. So I encourage you to think so outside of the box of what is possible and then build your book study around that. And then, as always, get feedback from the people that you're
Mhm.
doing the book study with as you're going along. Is this working for you? Is there something you'd change? Am I sending you too many emails?
Yeah.
Am I not sending you enough? Just those check-in points of making people feel like you are listening, that you are there for them. Because ultimately, if you are a book study facilitator, you are kind of in that role of how can I be serving you because this is
Yes.
your learning. I'm just here as the guide. I'm here as, the dungeon master, the pathway, and that's what I'm here as. And you are the learner. So how can I meet you where you're at? And so yeah, other than everything else we've talked about today, that's my main thing is just be creative and let your dreams kind of become a reality with this because online learning is so flexible and can be such an awesome opportunity to do some really fun things. So, yeah, that would be my advice.
That's fantastic. And, that embracing your role as a facilitator, as a guide, right? Trying something that might feel out of the box, I think is such great advice for someone who's right on the edge, maybe ready to jump in and just needed that extra push. So, Linda, this has been so useful and actionable for listeners. I'm going to link out to some places where people can learn more about your work, but where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work?
Absolutely. So you can connect with me personally, Linda, if you want to find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. You can also just visit the LTC's website at ltcillinois.org and find information about me as well as all of our online options. Like I said, we have a self-paced book study called Book Quest. We have a ton of other online courses for people and just webinars, workshops, online stuff galore, as well as a bunch of other in-person stuff, conferences. So you can kind of browse what we got there. But yeah, thanks so much for having me today, Monica. This has been great. And it's a huge passion of mine. I love online learning and I want people to be successful in it.
And thank you so much for your time today. It was so much fun chatting with Linda today. Let's finish up with a few key points from today's episode. Know your participants and design a book club around their needs. Make meetings purposeful with structured activities. Pick books that work across roles and subjects. Use flexible, creative formats for your book studies. Remember, you can find the show notes and full list of resources from today's episode, including all of the ways to connect with Linda, by heading to easyedtechpodcast.com. This episode is sponsored by my Amazon storefront. I've pulled together more than a dozen lists of my favorite gifts, books, and spring cleaning items for educators. My collections on Amazon make it easy to find all of my books written by Easy EdTech Podcast guests, and so much more. Use the link classtechtips.com/Amazon to go straight to my Amazon storefront. That's classtechtips.com/Amazon. Thank you for listening to this new episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. I love creating new episodes for you each week, but I could use a bit of help spreading the word about the podcast. Can you leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app? Spotify will let you tap on the stars, and Apple Podcasts will let you tap on the stars and leave a 1 or 2 sentence review. Thank you so much for taking this extra step. It helps other educators find episodes like this one when they're searching for EdTech tips.